Please introduce yourself and tell us why you're at EMEX.
I'm Steve Malkin, I'm CEO and founder of the Planet Mark. I'm here at EMEX because this is a place where energy, carbon, net zero, is brought together by the real estate and the property industry. So it's a fabulous and exciting place to be in terms of how we look at net zero and reducing carbon in real estate. So Planet Mark is a certification for organisations to help them reduce carbon on an annual basis. By doing that, we can provide our certification. It's an exciting sort of program, so it's not just about measuring and reducing reporting, it's about engaging people in the process, and it's about actually communicating that really openly and transparently to show that we can all cut carbon together. And we're also a net zero program, so we're taking lots and lots of companies to net zero.
What is the current consensus on carbon reporting?
We're in a really interesting point here on carbon measurement and how it is reported, particularly because there's so much carbon in real estate and property. It's a fantastic place to focus. So a couple of issues and opportunities really. One is that we really want consistent measurement of carbon emissions, and we break that into 3 scopes, which I think a lot of people are now sort of recognising. Scope 1 carbon emissions, those associated with fuel, like typically in properties, gas. And Scope 2 is largely around electricity. Both of those are really straightforward. Scope 3 is the challenging bit, which is about everything else. So it's purchased goods and services, it's transport, distribution and so on. So it's a massive focus on measurement. And that measurement is really important because the property industry generally is demanding really, really good reporting. And that reporting has to be open and transparent because within property, there's sort of reporting called ESG, environmental social governance, and those ESG reports demand data which is true and accurate to show how real estate is actually performing, in terms of its environment, its social and its governance, and indeed to net zero.
How are you helping businesses begin their net zero journey?
When we operate all across the UK. In fact, Planet Mark works internationally. One of the things we'd done last year on the lead up to COP26 is we were travelling around the country in this electric bus on the lead up to COP26 to take a net zero story out to organisations who, to be frank, were quite confused about what net zero was, what it is and how it relates to their company. And we're seeing that all the way through 2022, and I know it'll be a big thing in 2023. I think the issue we've got with net zero is just making sure that everyone understands what it is and how it relates to their company, and then to embrace it. The way you embrace it might be in a couple of ways. One is that you need to measure and report and reduce your carbon emissions. And the next thing you need to do is actually sort of communicate that so it's really good for your business. Yeah, and so there's a challenge here in getting data for your measurement, but there's also a massive opportunity in terms of the business value that can deliver, both in terms of saying I've got better understanding of my energy and therefore I can deliver energy efficiency and cost savings, but I'm also can say I'm on a net zero journey, and that helps you win more business because you're aligned better with your customer base.
What are the current affairs influencing SMEs to reach for net zero?
So let's take a look at legislation and regulation. Some people sort of say, what's the relevance of COP and this latest COP27? And it can no doubt do more. But actually what happens there is that you get sort of, international standards, international goals and targets, cascading into standards, cascading down into national policy and regulation. And let's take that net zero piece of that. Companies in the UK which are need to set net zero targets, because of Scope 3, this cascade comes down actually to their supply chain, and it comes down to SMEs. So even though the SMEs are below that regulation and legislation, it's hitting them, and it's super relevant to them right now. So they must also set net zero targets. And for an SME or a smaller business, that's a place where they really need help, and that's a place where the Planet Mark helps hundreds of them. So from a big perspective, that regulation and legislation is really, really taking effect. There's another driver in here, as well as that energy legislation sort of piece. It's actually about the whole energy crisis, and you can also look at it, the cost of living crisis. Let's just take energy though. So energy prices are at record highs. And what that means in terms of every organisation is they're absolutely doubling down on how they can save money. Looking at your carbon footprint is a great way to do that. So if you measure your carbon, you can see the different places where your company is using energy, and then you can find different ways and means to reduce it. So we are becoming super busy in terms of our energy audits, our ESOS reporting and so on, because there has never been a better time to do all of your LEDs, your lighting, your heating, your HVAC units, and make everything in your organisation, your business, your property portfolio, it needs to work harder in terms of energy efficiency. And the return on investment in carbon cutting and decarbonisation has never been better. So if you're looking for an excuse to go to net zero, now is the time.
What challenges are presented by net zero targets?
So there are challenges here. So there's loads of great business benefits around net zero. Some of the challenges are these. For organisations, to get to net zero, you need to measure your Scope 1 emissions, your Scope 2, and you need to measure your Scope 3. To do that can be quite challenging, getting your data together. There's a couple of ways that we can help with that. One is you can actually start with your spend-based data, which is applying factors to the amount of money you spend on different goods and services. Great way to get an approximation of your Scope 3 emissions, which is vital for your net zero goals. And then after that, you can then get better granular data. One big suggestion we've got is always reach out to your supply chain and ask them if they're measuring and reducing carbon. If so, can they report it to you? And if they're not, ask them to start now.